Okay, so let's talk about one of the most personal questions anyone can ever face. Should you have children? For a long time, that was a pretty private decision, but not anymore. Lately, it seems to have just exploded into this huge public debate, and it's packed with these really high-stakes arguments about society, the meaning of life, and, yeah, the future of humanity itself.
So, this choice, to have kids or not to have kids, it's now right at the center of this really deep disagreement, both culturally and philosophically. And we're not just talking about lifestyle choices here. This is about two completely different ways of looking at the world.
So let's meet the two key voices in this whole thing. On one side, you've got Professor Marcus Ellison. He's a philosopher who argues that parenthood isn't just a choice, it's practically a moral duty. And on the other side, we have essayist Daniel Cross, who's a major advocate for the child-free life, seeing it as a path of freedom and making a conscious choice. All right, so their first big point of conflict, it's right here. It's that classic push and pull between our own individual desires and what society, expects from us. And that really boils down to this one core question. Is having a child a completely private decision, or do we owe something to the collective? Do we have some kind of obligation to the future of our society?
And Dr. Ellison, he comes out swinging with this really powerful argument. For him, the problem isn't one person deciding not to have kids. No, it's when that choice becomes a movement, an identity. He looks at declining birth rates and doesn't just see a statistic. He sees a genuine existential threat to our entire civilization.
And then you have Daniel Cross, who comes right back with a direct counter. He frames this whole thing around individual liberty. His point is simple. This choice is so personal, so fundamental, that society just has no business, no right to stick its nose in or make any kind of claim. And there it is. That's the fundamental clash right there. On one hand, Ellison is warning about a demographic time bomb, a society that gets too old and literally can't sustain itself. But on the other hand, Cross sees that argument as a dangerous step too far, basically putting the needs of the state above a person's most basic freedom. But this debate doesn't just stay up here at the big societal level. It gets personal, fast. It becomes a discussion about what it even means to live a good life. So Ellison brings out the big guns from philosophy. He talks about Aristotle's idea of eudaimonia, which is this concept of, true human flourishing. And his argument is that this isn't just about feeling happy. Real flourishing comes from being part of something bigger than yourself, being part of that grand human story, passing life and culture down through the generations. Cross, though, he pushes back on that, hard. He basically asks, okay, but what about all the other ways people contribute? Is a person who dedicates their life to curing diseases or creating art or fighting climate change, are they contributing less to the future? He thinks defining contribution as only having kids is just way too narrow. Okay, and this is maybe Ellison's most interesting point. He says that all those studies you see, the ones that say child-free people are happier, they're missing the point. He draws a line between satisfaction, which is about pleasure and ease, and meaning, which is deeper and often involves sacrifice. For him, parenthood is the ultimate path to meaning, even if it means less day-to-day happiness. So you can see the philosophical split, right? For Ellison, meaning is collective. It's about being a link in the chain, continuing the human story. But for Cross, meaning is diverse. It's individual. It can be found in a million different ways that make life richer for everyone. All right, let's switch gears a bit. We've talked philosophy, now let's get practical. Because both of these guys are really concerned about the future. The thing is, they see the biggest threat coming from completely opposite directions. And this is the number that really anchors Cross's argument. There was this study back in 2017 that found that in a high-consumption society, having one fewer child is the single biggest thing you can do for the environment. I mean, it reduces your carbon footprint by way more than giving up your car or even going vegan. Wow, Ellison's comeback to this is really sharp. He says that logic, if you take it to its extreme, means the best thing for the environment would be for humans to just go extinct. He's like, look, telling people not to have kids to fight climate change is surrendering the future, not saving it. After all, the scientists and engineers who are going to solve these problems, well, they have to be born first, right? So this really lays out the two competing fears for the future. What worries you more? A demographic crisis, where there aren't enough young people to keep society going? Or an environmental crisis, where we're consuming our way into oblivion? So,
After all that back and forth, you'd think these two would never agree on anything. But then the conversation takes this really surprising turn. They both start talking about what it would mean to make a truly free choice about having kids without all the pressure from society one way or the other. And here it is, the common ground. It turns out both Ellison and Cross are completely on the same page about this. Society needs to make it easier to be a parent. We're talking affordable childcare, paid leave, flexible jobs. They both agree that if someone can't afford to have a kid, that's not a real choice, is it?
When you really get down to it, Ellison makes it clear what he's most worried about. It's not about forcing anyone. It's about what he sees as this cultural atmosphere, this vibe that makes parenthood seem like a drag, something uncool or unsophisticated, instead of something deeply meaningful.
And Cross gives you the perfect mirror image of that thought. He says, look, for centuries, all the pressure went one way. You had to have kids. So he sees the child-free movement as just a necessary balancing act. It's about creating space for people to make a different, deliberate choice that's just as valid.
Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question to think about. How do we measure a society? Is it by its birth rates, just making sure we keep going no matter what? Or is it by the quality of the lives it makes possible for everyone, parents and non-parents alike, giving them the freedom and support to live a life with meaning? That's really what's at the heart of this whole debate.